Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more soul-stirring tales. Now sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. The glass doors of the penthouse clicked shut behind Julian Maddox, shielding him from the stormy Manhattan skyline that sprawled like a restless ocean outside. The thunder had been relentless all evening, echoing the tension in his chest. It had been one of those days. The boardroom reeked of fake smiles and thinly veiled power plays. Contracts had been signed, empires expanded, but the hollowness inside him remained untouched. Julian loosened his tie with a weary sigh, his 6'2" frame shadowed by the dim lights spilling across the minimalist decor of his apartment. Marble floors, chrome edges, floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything about the place screamed success, but nothing in it ever felt like home. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and stepped into the guest suite. He'd just approved renovations earlier that morning. The design team had been meticulous, down to the Italian silk curtains. His assistant had mentioned that the new live-in housekeeper had moved in temporarily until her quarters downstairs were finalized. Julian hadn't met her yet. He pushed open the bedroom door, calling out casually, "Just checking." He stopped. Time seemed to pause. A heartbeat stretched into an eternity. There, in the gentle spill of golden lamplight, stood a woman, her back turned to him, midway through changing. She gasped, arms instinctively crossing her chest, a silk blouse slipping through her fingers. She was not exposed in a way tabloids would find scandalous, but somehow it felt more intimate than nudity. Vulnerability hung in the air like perfume, delicate and raw. Julian stumbled backward. I'm so sorry," he muttered, turning on his heel, his voice hoarse, laced with an unfamiliar emotion. "I thought this room was empty." He shut the door behind him, leaning against it, heart pounding like he'd sprinted up 20 flights. What had just happened? Why was he suddenly short of breath? And why? Dear God, why? Could he not stop thinking about the curve of her shoulder, the startled softness in her eyes, the grace in the chaos of that moment? Her name was Lila Rose, 28, quiet, graceful in a way that made time slow down around her. The kind of beauty you notice slowly, like a violin beginning to play beneath the noise of a crowded room. She had come from Charleston after losing her mother to cancer. Her last words to Lila had been, "Go find a life worth living, not just surviving." And so Lila packed up her dreams, her degree in literature, and the cookbook pages stained with her mother's notes, and moved to the city that never slept. She hadn't expected to work for a billionaire. She hadn't expected anything, really, except maybe peace. She avoided Julian the next day, and the day after that. But on the third morning, he stood in the kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled, trying to figure out how to work the espresso machine. She hadn't seen a man look so out of place, and yet so beautifully human. "Need help?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Julian turned, startled. "You're Lila," he said, as if trying the name on his tongue. "Yes, please. I think this thing is plotting against me." She smiled, and just like that, the tension fractured. Over the next few weeks, they began to orbit each other in slow, cautious patterns. He would catch her humming Nina Simone while she dusted the bookshelves. She would find his notes scribbled in the margins of his novels, thoughtful, poetic, lonely. Julian began coming home earlier. He started noticing things, like how she made herbal tea at exactly 9:47 p.m., or how she paused when she read, lips parted, eyes slightly narrowed, as if letting the words wash over her. He didn't mean to fall in love, but love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock. It just walks in, uninvited, unexpected, like he had walked in on her that night. One evening, the storm returned. The power flickered. The lights died. She was lighting candles in the hallway when he appeared beside her, holding a flashlight. "No electricity," he murmured. "Guess we'll have to make do." She laughed lightly. "Not a fan of the dark. Not a fan of feeling powerless," he replied. Then, after a pause, "But maybe it's not always a bad thing." They ended up on the couch, drinking peppermint tea and talking. And for the first time in years, Julian let someone see him. Not the billionaire, not the empire, just a man with scars, silence, and a heart that had waited too long to feel. Lila listened, really listened. And when she spoke of her mother, of loss, of rebuilding, Julian realized something had shifted. He didn't just want her near. He needed her near. But life, as always, doesn't let love bloom without a test. Julian's ex-fiancée, Vanessa, returned. Tall, blonde, ruthless. A merger of two families had once been on the table. She wanted him back. Less for love, more for legacy. Julian refused. He tried not to come off as a man using wealth to fix what words couldn't touch. But Vanessa didn't take rejection well. Within a week, tabloids ran stories. Billionaire Julian Maddox in secret affair with live-in maid. The headlines stung, not because of what they said about him, but what they reduced Lila to. She saw them the next morning, folded neatly on the kitchen table. He walked in, apology already spilling from his lips, but she didn't look angry. She looked hurt. "I thought we were invisible," she said softly. "But apparently, I'm just another scandal in your world." "You're not," he said fiercely, stepping forward. "Lila, please. I'll fix this." But she shook her head. "I didn't come to New York to be someone's secret shame." And just like that, she packed her bags, left a note, and was gone. Julian sat behind the wheel of his car, parked just a few blocks away from the cafe Lila worked at. He had no real reason to be there, except for the fact that since that day, since that accidental, vulnerable encounter, she hadn't left his mind. Not for a second. The memory of her, bare shoulders, startled eyes, the flush of her skin, had become a haunting kind of poetry in his chest. But more than that, it was the quiet strength she carried afterward that mesmerized him. The way she carried on with grace, not pretending like it didn't happen, but not letting it define her either. That kind of resilience, he hadn't seen it in a long time. He had tried to apologize in a letter, then in a carefully crafted bouquet of white lilies and wildflowers with a card that read, "I never meant to invade your moment, but I can't seem to forget it. Julian." But the truth was, he didn't know any other way to reach her. Lila hadn't responded, not in words, but he caught her glance once, through the cafe's front window. Her eyes had locked on his car, and he could have sworn there was a softness behind the glass, a glimmer of a thought she wasn't ready to say out loud. Now, parked there like a man without a compass, Julian questioned everything. He'd built empires, conquered negotiations with the ruthlessness of a king, but now his heart felt like a foreign land. Suddenly, the door to the cafe swung open, and there she was, Lila Rose. She wore a simple blue dress, soft cotton that danced slightly with the breeze, and her hair was pulled back into a loose braid. Her eyes searched the street, not rushed, not frantic, just expectant, curious, like she could feel something in the air and wanted to name it. Julian didn't think. He stepped out of his car. Their eyes met. She didn't look surprised. She didn't smile either, but she didn't look away. "I guess this is the part where I ask what you're doing here," she said, voice even. Julian offered a small nod. "I wouldn't blame you if you told me to leave." She looked at him for a long time, then sighed, one of those sighs that said she was tired of pretending. "I didn't respond because I didn't know what to say," she said, eyes locked on his. "That day embarrassed me, but not just because you saw me, because I didn't know what you saw." Julian took a step closer. "I saw someone I couldn't forget, and I've tried." There was silence between them, honest, humming, electric. "I don't need pity," she said softly. "I'm not looking for a savior." "Neither am I," Julian replied. "I'm just here, for whatever this moment is. For however long you'll have me in it." Lila looked away, then back at him with a hesitant smile curling at the corners. "Do you drink tea?" Julian blinked. "I own vineyards, but I suppose I can learn." She laughed. A real laugh, like sunlight through an open window. "Good. Because my shift ended 10 minutes ago, and you're about to have the worst chamomile of your life." They walked side by side. No declarations. No promises. Just two people stepping into something unspoken. The tea shop Lila led him to was tucked between a used bookstore and a plant shop, fragrant with jasmine and old paper. They found a quiet corner by the window. Lila ordered chamomile, true to her word, and Julian followed her lead, although he'd always preferred espresso strong enough to burn his regrets. Their conversation started cautiously, work, weather, the music playing overhead. But as the hours softened around them, the space between their words grew more intimate. He learned her favorite poet was Pablo Neruda. She used to dance ballet until her mother passed, and she couldn't afford the lessons anymore. She made candles in her apartment with wax and whispers of lavender. She learned that Julian, for all his millions, sometimes slept with the television on because silence reminded him of the mansion he grew up in, echoing with the absence of love. That he had a younger sister who lived in Paris and only called him when she needed money. That sometimes, when he looked at the skyline from his penthouse, he wondered what it would be like to live beneath it instead of above. By the time the cups had emptied, the rain had begun. Not a storm, just a soft, steady pattern that made the world feel quieter, more reflective. "I should go," she said, rising, though her body leaned slightly toward him. "Lila," Julian said, standing too. "Can I see you again?" She looked at him, eyes searching, and for a moment, Julian was sure she would say no. But then she smiled. "Yes, but next time, let me invite you in." They met again 2 nights later. This time, she invited him to her apartment. It was small, cozy, filled with the scent of beeswax and cinnamon. Candles glowed in corners, casting soft shadows. A record player hummed Nina Simone's voice like silk in the air. Julian had brought nothing with him but wine and nerves. But Lila was calm, sure, grounded in a way that drew him like a tide. They sat on the rug in the middle of the room, sipping slowly, sharing stories too personal for strangers, too natural for acquaintances. Eventually, Julian reached into his coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "I don't normally write things by hand," he said, "but I wrote this the night I met you." After that moment, Lila hesitated, then took the note and unfolded it. Her eyes danced across his words, stammered, raw, unsure. It simply read, "In a world of perfect timing, I would have knocked. I would have waited. But fate never asked for permission. And somehow, I saw you before I knew you. Now I can't stop wanting to learn every version of who you are." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Julian," she said, "you didn't just walk in on me that day. You walked into a chapter of my life I didn't know was waiting to begin." They spent the next several weeks like two people discovering what it meant to feel again. Julian took her to the quiet parts of the city, places he used to visit alone. She introduced him to things he'd never known he needed: candlelit jazz in basements, laughing through burnt pancakes, slow walks under gray skies. They weren't lovers, not yet, but they were something far more dangerous. Hopeful. He found himself waiting for her text like a teenager. He canceled meetings just to be with her for an extra hour. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest started to lift. And Lila, she softened. She let him touch the corners of her past, the ones where her father left, the ones where her mother worked 2 jobs and still smiled, the ones where she learned to survive, alone, with no blueprint. He kissed her one night, under a street lamp while it rained, and she kissed him back like it meant something. Because it did. Julian didn't tell her he loved her. Not yet, but it was rising in his throat like a song he couldn't stop humming. Then, just as suddenly as she had entered his life. She began to disappear. It started with her replies coming slower. Then her voice on the phone grew distant, cordial, polite. She canceled their dinner one night. Then two. When he finally showed up at her apartment with a bag of her favorite almond croissants, someone else answered the door. A woman, older, maybe a neighbor. She looked at him with quiet sympathy. "She's not here," the woman said gently. "She left yesterday, gave up the lease, packed everything, said she was going back home, wherever that is." Julian blinked. "Did she leave anything? A note? A message?" The woman shook her head. "Just a smile and a thank you." He stood there for a full minute after the door closed, holding the croissants, holding breath he didn't know he'd lost. Weeks passed. No word from Lila. Julian hired no investigator, made no calls. He could have. He had the means. But something about her silence told him not to chase her, that she needed to be the one to choose if this story continued. He stared at his penthouse windows one night, the lights of the city blinking like Morse code. But they said nothing, just like her. 3 months later, a letter came, handwritten, no return address, just his name. Inside it read, "Julian, you changed the rhythm of my life without asking for anything in return. You were kind when I had walls. You saw me when I was hiding, and that scared me more than anything. You offered me a mirror, and I wasn't ready to see myself in it. I thought I was, but I'm not. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of what I might become if I stayed, dependent on someone else's strength to carry my own. And I can't do that. Not again. You deserve a kind of love I don't know how to give yet. Maybe one day I will. Maybe one day our paths will cross again, when I've found the parts of myself I lost long before you ever walked in. Until then, don't wait for me. Just remember me kindly. Lila Rose." Julian read the letter once, then again, then a third time with tears blurring the ink. He didn't curse her, didn't hate her. How could he? She didn't break him with cruelty. She broke him with honesty. And in that heartbreak, he realized, not every love story ends with forever. Some just leave behind a quieter version of you, one that remembers but doesn't ache.